They thought I was a fool, a poor wrinkled man who didn't belong in a room filled with chandeliers and fine wine. When I arrived at my son's engagement dinner, dressed in an old coat and muddy shoes, I saw the laughter they tried to hide. My son's fiancée smiled, but her parents didn't. To them I was a burden, a name that didn't belong next to theirs. So I sat quietly watching them boast about their business, their status, their success. Every word dripped with pride and in pity for me. But little did they know, the company they bragged about building was mine, and tonight I wasn't here to impress them. I was here to measure them. I arrived early, out of habit more than anything. Years of managing people taught me one thing. You can learn a lot about someone by how they treat those they think are beneath them. The restaurant was expensive, the kind where a bottle of water costs more than a meal back home. I didn't care. My son David was happy, or so I thought. He'd been talking about his fiancée Rebecca for months. Kind, elegant, and from a good family. He wanted me to make a good impression, so I promised I'd be on my best behavior. I came in my simplest clothes, worn jacket, old shoes, a shirt my late wife had ironed years ago before she passed. I didn't want to impress anyone. I wanted to see them. When Rebecca's parents arrived, I stood to greet them. Her father barely shook my hand. Her mother looked at me the way people look at a stain they can't wash off. "You must be Peter," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "David told us you keep things simple." Simple. That word again, a polite way of saying poor. We sat. The waiter came, and I noticed how Rebecca's father ordered the most expensive wine without asking. He spoke loudly, laughed louder. Every sentence began with my company and ended with profits. Rebecca's mother whispered something about how fortunate David was to marry up. I smiled. If only they knew. You see, 10 years ago I sold my company, the same one her father was bragging about investing in. Back then it was a struggling firm. I handed over the shares quietly to an old business partner, under a different holding name. I didn't need recognition or power anymore. I wanted peace. But tonight, that peace was being tested. When the food came, her father leaned toward me. "So, Peter, what do you do these days?" he asked, pretending to care. "I fix things," I replied, "mostly around the neighborhood." "I like working with my hands," he smirked. Rebecca's mother sighed. "Oh, how nice," she said. "It's good to stay active at your age." David looked embarrassed. He didn't say a word. That silence cut deeper than any insult. They started talking about vacations, luxury cars, and how hard life was for people who didn't plan ahead. Then came the moment I'll never forget. Rebecca's mother offered me her leftovers. She smiled sweetly. "You can take these home if you'd like, Peter. No need to waste good food." The table went silent. My son froze. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the arrogance she tried to hide behind politeness. So I nodded slowly. "Thank you," I said. "I don't waste good things." They didn't know those words weren't about the food. They were about them. That night I went home, pulled out an old file from my drawer, company papers, signed contracts, original share certificates, all in my name. The same company her father claimed to own. The one funding their lavish life. And for the first time in years I felt something stir inside me. Not anger, not pride, justice. Because sometimes revenge doesn't need violence. Sometimes it just needs patience and truth. The next morning I woke up before the sun. Old habits die hard. I brewed my coffee the way I always did, 1 spoon, no sugar. Then I placed the documents on the table next to my cup and stared at the name printed in bold letters. Crawford Industries Holdings. My name. My legacy. It had been 15 years since I sold the shares under a different company name. I'd wanted to live quietly after my wife passed, to spend my last years in peace, not in boardrooms. But that dinner, that laughter, that tone in their voices, it all reminded me of the world I once walked away from. The world where people measured worth by money, not by soul. I didn't want revenge, not the kind that destroys. I wanted them to see, really see, the difference between wealth and worth. So I made a few calls. Quietly. A week later, I received an invitation. Crawford Industries, annual investor dinner. I smiled. The very company they bragged about building. I asked my son to come with me. He was hesitant. "Dad," he said softly, "I don't think Rebecca's family will be comfortable seeing you there." I just smiled. "They'll be more comfortable than they think," I replied. That night I arrived at the event in a dark gray suit. Simple, clean, but sharp. The kind of suit my wife used to love. David came along, confused but respectful. Rebecca and her parents were already there, laughing, holding glasses of wine, surrounded by people trying to impress them. When they saw me, Rebecca's mother froze. Her father raised his eyebrows. "Peter?" he said. "I didn't realize you were invited to this kind of event." I nodded politely. I wouldn't miss it. The host approached with a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We're about to begin." As everyone settled, the lights dimmed and the company logo appeared on the screen. The same logo her father had been boasting about. Then the host spoke again. "Tonight, we honor the man who made all of this possible. The founder, the visionary, the one who believed when no one else did. Mr. Peter Crawford." Every head turned. Every glass froze midair. Rebecca's father's smile disappeared like a shadow under light. I stood slowly. Applause filled the room. David looked at me, eyes wide, realization sinking in like dawn breaking over a mountain. I walked to the stage calmly, took the microphone, and spoke. "Thank you," I said. "Years ago I built this company with the belief that people, not profits, define success. I sold it to a partner I trusted. But I never stopped caring about the values it stood for. Honesty, humility, and respect." I paused. My eyes met Rebecca's parents. "I learned recently that those values are sometimes forgotten, especially at the dinner table." The audience laughed softly, not cruelly but knowingly. I continued, voice steady. "We live in a world where people chase status and forget that true wealth is character. I'm not here to embarrass anyone. I'm here to remind us all, never underestimate someone just because they live simply. Because one day you might be standing in their house drinking their wine and bragging about their work." A ripple of murmurs spread across the hall. Rebecca's mother turned pale. Her father looked down, face red, jaw tight. I handed the microphone back and stepped off the stage. No more words were needed. When I reached the table, David stood up. "Dad," he whispered, "you built this?" "All of it," I nodded. "Your mother and I started it long before you were born. I just never thought I'd have to remind anyone of that." Rebecca was silent. For the first time, her proud face softened, guilt mixing with realization. Her parents tried to speak, but I just raised a hand. "I'm not angry," I said quietly. "I just hope you remember this. Wealth can buy you dinners, but it can't buy you dignity." Then I turned to my son. "Choose people who see your worth before your wallet. That's how you'll know who deserves your future." We left early. The applause behind me faded as the door closed. Outside, the night was calm again. Snow began to fall just like the night of that first dinner. I looked up at the sky, and for the first time in a long while I felt my wife's presence in that quiet wind. Gentle, approving, at peace. I smiled. Revenge didn't need anger. It just needed truth, and tonight truth had spoken. The next morning I woke to silence. The kind of silence that follows a storm. Clean, still, almost peaceful. My phone buzzed a few times. Messages, missed calls. David, Rebecca, even her father. I didn't reply. I sat at the kitchen table watching sunlight spill through the window, touching the same pile of documents that had once defined my life. For years, I'd tried to live quietly, away from the noise, the greed, the endless race for more. But sometimes life pulls you back not to punish you, but to remind you of who you are. When I finally opened the messages, I read them slowly. David's came first. Dad, I don't know what to say. I'm proud of you. I'm sorry I didn't speak up that night. I smiled faintly. He didn't need to apologize. Some lessons in life can't be told and they have to be witnessed. Then came Rebecca's text. Mr. Crawford, I didn't know. I was wrong about you. About everything. Please forgive my parents. I closed my eyes and sighed. Forgiveness, it's a heavy word. I'd learned long ago that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. It just means you choose peace over poison. So I typed back, you don't owe me anything, Rebecca. Just treat my son with honesty. That's all I ever wanted. And then I left it at that. Later that day I got a call from an old colleague, someone who still worked in the company. He told me that after the event, Rebecca's father quietly stepped down from his position. Too many eyes were watching. Too many whispers had begun. It wasn't my intention to ruin him. But sometimes arrogance collapses under its own weight. I didn't need to push. I just needed to let truth breathe. The week that followed was quiet. David came to visit me more often. We fixed small things around the house, the creaky fence, the broken porch light, the leaky sink. Simple work, the kind that keeps a man grounded. One evening he asked, Dad, why didn't you ever tell me who you really were? I smiled, wiping my hands on an old rag. Because, son, I wanted you to know who you were before you knew what you could inherit. He nodded slowly, understanding what words couldn't explain. You see, people today are obsessed with showing off, titles, money, brands. But the quiet ones, the ones who live with purpose instead of pride, they're the ones who change everything. I'd seen men lose themselves chasing respect, not realizing that true respect doesn't come from wealth. It comes from how you treat people who can do nothing for you. Rebecca's family learned that lesson the hard way, and my son learned it the right way. A few weeks later, David and Rebecca invited me for dinner, this time at their modest home. No fancy wine, no chandeliers, no fake smiles, just homemade food, laughter, and warmth. When Rebecca served me a plate, her hands trembled slightly. I made this myself, she said quietly. I hope it's good. I looked at her, then at my son. Their eyes told me everything. They'd learned. So I smiled and said, It's perfect. That night, as I sat in my car before driving home, I looked at the stars and thought of my wife. If she were here, she'd probably laugh and say I handled it too kindly. But she'd also be proud, and because in the end, justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and the world listens. A month later, I returned to the same restaurant, not for a meeting, but for closure. The same waiter greeted me, surprised. Good evening, sir. Table for one? Yes, I said. For one. He led me to a corner table, the same corner where Rebecca's mother once offered me leftovers. When the food arrived, I took a quiet moment, folded my napkin, and smiled. Not out of pride, but out of gratitude for the lesson, the patience, the full circle. They thought they saw a poor man. But what they saw was a mirror, and in that mirror they found themselves exposed. Now I live simpler than ever. My wealth stays where it belongs, in the past. My peace, though, that's mine forever. Because sometimes the greatest revenge is not proving them wrong. It's watching them realize it all on their own. And when that happens, you don't need applause. Just silence. And the satisfaction of knowing the truth did its job. Thanks for watching Revenge UX, where quiet dignity always wins and karma never forgets. Remember, not all revenge shouts. Some just smiles.